Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Stirewalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
And welcome to Ink Stained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana Johnson, let me tell you something about producer, maybe now we'll have to call him executive producer, senior producer, Colin Chicola, is that he and I are from the same trashy kind of culinary energy. And if you're watching at home, you can see that Colin is helping us celebrate Grimace's birthday. We are not, very obviously not being compensated by McDonald's, but we have had something of a running gag on this show about McDonald's. Some of you may remember the McRib episode where Eliana ate her first ever McRib. And I had included a piece for today's about a serious journalistic breakdown of what Grimace is, and I was surprised that as McDonald's celebrates Grimace's fake birthday, that Grimace did have a backstory, that he was originally a villain. Did you know that?
No.
He was originally a villain, I guess part of Mayor McCheese's, or the Hamburglers.
I was going to say.
The Hamburglers gang.
Was the villain.
And that Grimace is a taste bud. He is a giant, distended, misshapen, tragic. So he's like the elephant man of these things. And so Cookie has gotten for us a Grimace's birthday meal bash because we are trash.
I love McDonald's.
I know, me too. I don't love McDonald's because I'm not trash. That's not why.
I reject your association.
I think we can say, and I'm
also pissed that you took that Big Mac.
Well, you get I can't eat the nuggets because they're all breaded. I'm going to have a very small taste of the milkshake.
So I've never tried this before. I've only heard rave reviews of the, what's the green shake that they do at St. Patrick's Day? Shamrock shake. Yes.
Okay, that's
good.
We're
going to have to try that too.
No, that's good. It's berry. It's lightly berry. And like all McDonald's milkshakes should, it is not ice cream. It is I assume it's also caulk. Have you ever left a McDonald's milkshake in your car or something and it melts, but it doesn't melt? It just becomes warm. It doesn't change states. What do you say?
It's really good.
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out the flavor.
I think it's berry. I think it's...
Yeah. It tastes grapey a little.
Yeah, it's you know what flavor it is? It's purple flavored.
It's very good.
It's a purple flavored thing.
It's very good.
Now, like an animal, I'm going to eat the patties from the...
Oh, my gosh. I can't believe you're doing that on video.
Are you kidding me?
He's eating a Big Mac taco.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that on TikTok.
I'm into it. It's delicious. And I'm here to be slightly less fat. So I'm for it.
All right. Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with our front
this?
page. Yes. Chris loves to be communal and say they're all our items, but this is my item.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to start talking a little bit about the Hunter Biden plea deal and the press coverage that it received.
Okay.
You don't have to. You can just eat, and I can talk.
No, I'm here. I'm a beefy participant.
And I wanted to give a shout out. I'm sure everyone can predict that I thought the press coverage was pretty bad and did not sufficiently skewer or press the Biden administration for the president having said repeatedly that his son did nothing wrong and respond with umbrage every time he was asked about it. But anyhow, I wanted to put in a link in our newsletter and shout out Andy McCarthy at National Review, who has just a short piece, but he wrote 6 weeks ago that the president, who, when he said my son had done nothing wrong, Andy pointed out that that was an interference with the investigation because he is broadcasting to the Justice Department something. And Andy said then, this has led to speculation that the scam I've been predicting for a couple of years is imminent. The Justice Department could soon give Hunter a sweetheart plea deal in which he would admit guilt to the undeniable, a minor tax charge or two, plus perhaps a false statement on a required federal firearms form concealing his drug abuse. Swept under the rug would be the part of the investigation that really matters, the gross monetization of Joe Biden's political influence and what foreign adversaries like China believed they were buying. So that is exactly what happened. Pretty good. Pretty good. I would like to be able to write political predictions like that. And then Andy notes, this is not 6 weeks ago, but after the plea deal, he says, under Justice Department policy, even with the plea agreement, the government is supposed to seek a plea to the most serious, readily provable offense that is consistent with the nature and full extent of the defendant's conduct. And he's quoting Justice Department policy there. Hunter Biden committed tax offenses that could have been charged as evasion, which is punishable by up to 5 years imprisonment for each count. Furthermore, he made a false statement that enabled him to obtain a firearm. That's a 10-year felony under legislation pushed through by then Senator Joe Biden to show how very serious Democrats are about gun crime. So he goes on to say that this is all a departure from Justice Department policy, which is why it is in fact a sweetheart deal. And it's not, it's not just Republicans crying foul. But I thought that this piece, and we'll link it, was a useful antidote to all of the voluminous coverage of this in the mainstream press.
Well, Andy McCarthy is a national treasure, and I'm very glad that you included him. And I wouldn't have included mine. I debated whether to include mine because this is so rankly self-promotional. But since you already mentioned Andy's, I guess I will go ahead and roll around in this like a dog in a dead deer, like a dog in a Big Mac, and say that on June 9th, I published a piece that said, who the hell does Hunter Biden think he is? He made all these millions of dollars off of his family name, and now he's going to do like a aggressive Second Amendment defense on why he should be able to have not a license, have a permit to purchase a gun, and that he could do these things at this terrible cost to his father. And I said, politically, he's got to throw himself on the mercy of the court and try to do something. And obviously, Hunter Biden, Dispatch subscriber, clearly an avid Chris Direwalt reader, took the cue and is entering his plea. So there you go. I did it.
I love it.
I do think, though, that this is politics, not media, but I do think this poses an interesting question for Republicans and Trump. I don't know what other charges are likely to come for Hunter Biden. I assume some.
Well, so one of the weird things about this was that Hunter Biden's lawyer came forward and said the investigation is closed, everything's over, while the Justice Department said it's ongoing.
Well, this Delaware-based tax and gun thing may be done, but I suspect that in terms of what else Hunter Biden has done over the years, they're probably not done. But this is a good place to start. But the question now is, Republicans talking about the sweetheart deal. The question for Donald Trump is, what would you get if you pleaded, right? What kind of deal might Donald Trump get? Could Donald Trump avoid jail time if he pleaded guilty and made a deal here? And I bet he could. I bet it's possible. I mean, people go away for a long time for records, for state secrets and stuff, but there's some extenuating circumstances here. So as a political question, this is very helpful to Democrats that even though, to your point, the coverage was very tender, this is politically helpful for Democrats.
My favorite part of the mainstream coverage before we move on from this was the following in the New York Times about the diversion program that Hunter Biden is going into. And they're trying to normalize this. The New York Times writes, Hunter Biden's deal, which includes admitting he illegally possessed a handgun because he was addicted to drugs at the time of purchase, includes his entry into a diversion program, a common alternative to incarceration. First-time offenders, especially those not accused of committing acts of violence, are often sent to such programs, which have come into greater use as prison systems attempt to reduce their inmate populations and ease racial sentencing disparities. I don't think Hunter Biden is who the diversion programs were created for, guys.
Speaking of Donald Trump, I would like to commend my former colleague, Bret Baier, for, I think, the best Trump interview that I have seen since Lester Holt got Donald Trump to admit that he fired James Comey because of the Russia investigation. Bret did the way that he did a good job, and we talk about this here a lot, but the way that he did a good job was he was prepared. He did not go in with, the temptation if you're interviewing somebody like Trump, who the way that Trump lies is he knows that he's lying, you know that he's lying, and he's like, what are you going to do about it, right? The sky is green. I say it's green. You say it's not. I'm going to stand pat here. The way that Bret handled the situation, and I think with aplomb, was to go through and be very specific, right? Here is the specific thing that was said, and he managed in what could have been, he could have gotten steamrolled, and that would have been a disaster for him. Or he could have fought with Trump in a really argumentative way, and that would have been bad for his employers. But I think he found a way to get through that, made some news out of it, and Trump's lawyers must have just been taking gas the entire time. Watching that must have been extraordinarily painful.
The best part of this interview, I thought, and the most effective, and I want to play the clip of it, was when Baier asked Trump, you say you hire the best people.
Oh, it was...
and yet those people are now, you're fighting with them all, and they don't seem to have great things to say about you. You don't seem to have great things to say about them. Let's play that exchange.
In 2016, you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
Well, I did do that,
This
and we
time-
had tremendous. Look, we had the best economy we've ever had. The world has ever seen.
Your Vice President, Mike Pence, is running against you.
Yeah.
Your Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, she's running against you. Your former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said he's not supporting you. You mentioned National Security Advisor John Bolton. He's not supporting you either. You mentioned Attorney General Bill Barr, says you shouldn't be president again, calls you the consummate narcissist and troubled man. You recently called Barr a gutless pig. Your second Defense Secretary is not supporting you, called you irresponsible. This week, you and your White House called your White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, weak and ineffective and born with a very small brain. You called your acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, a born loser. You called your first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, dumb as a rock, and your first Defense Secretary, James Mattis, the world's most overrated general. You called your White House Press Secretary, Kayleigh Canadian, milquetoast, and multiple times you've referred to your Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao, as Mitch McConnell's China-loving wife. So, why did you hire all of them in the first place?
Because I hired 10 to 1 that were fantastic. We had a great economy. We had
Only 1 in 10. Only 1 in 10. That's just, there's 10 times as many people who love him than who say that he is an abomination and must not be allowed to return to office.
By the way, this comes on the heels of Trump calling Bill Barr a lowlife.
Yeah.
And, scum of the earth.
Yep.
I think lowlife is the exact term that he used.
The Donald Trump versus the world narrative that it doesn't matter what he does and he can just go on and do it. Maybe true, he may get the Republican nomination. Nobody may ever lay a glove on him, but it's a long way from now till the end of this year, and that's where we'll see how the mileage wears.
Up next, Chris, we have a call from the Chicago Tribune.
Oh,
cameras in the courtroom.
My gosh.
When Trump enters.
Oh, my gosh. Victor Shi. Oh, they've put it behind the paywall. Well, I can't read it again, but when I read it before, it was in the paywall. The argument is democracy demands, our institutions demand televising and live streaming Donald Trump's federal trial. I cannot emphasize what a bad idea cameras in courtrooms are. I cannot emphasize how bad it would be to put them in the Supreme Court, and I cannot tell you what a terrible choice it would be to put cameras in, of all federal trials, this federal trial. Just of all of the reasons that I could list here, let's just do the two obvious ones. O.J. Simpson. the travesty that was the O.J. Simpson trial, the ridiculous bit of cable television that was the O.J. Simpson trial? Or how about our dysfunctional and broken Congress? How about the way that Congress can't work because every committee hearing turns into a Real Housewives episode? And just, we can have reporters in there. They make a record of it. Putting the cameras into the courtroom does not increase accountability. It sounds like transparency, but as you've heard me say many times before, transparency and accountability are two different things. And you can be transparent without being accountable, and you can be accountable without being fully transparent. Let these trials take place. Just stop it.
Also, we've seen the same sort of distortion effort in the White House briefing room.
Yes.
Where the presence of cameras distorts what actually...
You got it.
It changes the dynamic of what actually happens there.
Performative tomfoolery.
And at times, like, it would be more informative not to have the cameras because the performance artist aspect to it makes the information extracted actually less useful.
All right, Jake Tapper in How Are Things Going at CNN post-licked. And Jake Tapper says CNN...
We long for the days.
Jake Tapper says CNN won't cover, quote, potentially dangerous Trump speech. This is the speech that Trump gave at his mini White House at his country club in New Jersey, which was a rambling... a typically Trumpian airing of grievances, and that they're not going to do it. They're not going to cover it.
Because they have integrity. They have backbone. They are the good people.
Tapper told his guest, and this is...
Yeah.
Tapper told his guest, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who doesn't perform. She's not performative. She doesn't just do it for attention. She's a serious lawmaker, okay?
She never says things that aren't true.
She doesn't just say things for the sake of getting attention and trolling. As I told you in the audience, we're not carrying his remarks live because, frankly, he says a lot of things that are not true and sometimes potentially dangerous. Folks in the control room, I don't need to see any more of that, said Tapper. He's trying to turn it into a spectacle, into a campaign ad. That's enough of that. We've seen it already. Okay, I understand why the town hall was a debacle. I got it. But Bret Baier just showed how it can be done, right? It can't. There's a way to do this stuff, and in the case of whether or not you're going to show Trump's remarks, don't tell me, show me, right? Don't tell me how superior you are because you're not going to show it. Just put on a TV show. It's just a TV show. You do your TV show. You do it any way you want to do it, but don't make this whole thing about, control room, take that down. We're not doing this. That's that. If your complaint is about performative foofery, don't be performatively foofer-ish when you're denouncing it.
That's
please.
saying don't be you.
Oh.
Don't be you.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, Gavin Newsom going on Sean Hannity. What say you, Eliana Johnson? Will you eat a McNugget? Will you eat a McNugget? You have a bailout with the Grimace meal here.
It's 11:17 in the morning. At McNugget was not on my.
I just ate a handful of hamburgers.
Yeah, I know, but you're the one who eats a bag of beef.
A bag of meat.
Breakfast.
Bag of meat.
Yeah.
I'll eat a bag of meat. Okay, fine. We have different standards. Some people have different standards.
I think it's great that Newsom did Hannity. I
do
love
too.
this stuff.
Yep.
And I remember because I was a writer and producer on Hannity. And the guy who would come on, it probably says something about him in retrospect, but Anthony Weiner would come on all the time.
Hey.
And I think more of this stuff should happen. Like, it does show the audience that, like, these are people who can have a conversation, who can get along.
We talked about Tim Scott going on The View. This is Gavin Newsom going on Hannity.
Wonderful.
Go on TV, talk to people, try to do it in a respectful way. I thought that was fine, and I thought that's the way it ought to be.
Should we play a clip?
Sure.
Let's do it.
I think he's a man of decency and character. I'm really proud of the president. I'm proud of what he's accomplished.
Is he strong enough to be president? That's what I'm
strong enough.
talking
Look
about.
what he just did to McCarthy. He ran circles. Look at the vote card.
I didn't like the vote. I wouldn't have voted for it.
Exactly. Kevin got played by the President of the United States. I'm for results. I'm for results.
I don't think the American people benefit. I like the plan that would have saved $4.8 trillion. All right.
The hair alone in that segment between those two gentlemen.
He's a handsome man, Newsom.
But the
say.
Sean hair game is serious. He has serious hair. That's like a hair showdown. That is hair v. hair. Okay, my colleague Christine Rosen.
This was a wonderful piece.
Is she smart? A lot of people are saying Christine Rosen, one of the smartest people writing in commentary. And I wrote a whole book about this, so I was definitely feeling what she was feeling. And she used the occasion of the launch of Tucker Carlson's Twitter show, including his discussion of sweaty, rat-faced, anti-Christian Jewish leaders, to talk about something that we talk about here a lot, which is cable news. The window, the aperture is closing around cable news.
The title of the piece is "The End of Cable News?" ? But there really doesn't need to be a question mark. The industry is in inexorable decline, and she writes in her piece in Commentary Magazine, which we will link, about the decentralization that started back in 2004. The unsettled media landscape is part of a much larger 40-year story about the collapse of gatekeepers, with new media such as cable news, the internet, and now social platforms, each playing a part in upending both the old order and each iteration of the new order that preceded it. Much of this was a welcome democratization of an industry that had grown insular, sanctimonious, and unaccountable in its behavior. Yes, we just gave a couple of examples.
Word.
CNN. When a Powerline commenter successfully exposed the fact that CBS News icon Dan Rather had aired a story on 60 Minutes just before the 2004 election that lied about President George W. Bush's service in the Texas National Guard based on falsified documents that Rather had failed to verify, it heralded a new world of citizen-sponsored fact-checking of institutions. It also spelled the end of Rather, who, along with his producer, was fired from CBS News.
I agree wholeheartedly with Christine, who's such a good writer. But I do think there is another. The next thing is this. And I've been thinking about this a lot as it relates to artificial intelligence, as it relates to the loss of the blue checks and accountability and all of those things. The value of straight news is only increasing. In a chaotic space where opinion has supplanted substantially, emotional-driven blabber has substantially supplanted real reporting and reliable news, we are now in a place where, as people become less confident in sources, reliable, good reporting and reliable news becomes more valuable.
One of the things that I think when you say that is that people don't agree on what straight news is.
Right.
When I think about, like, what are the sources I go to, I could cite a handful of sources that I think of as straight news, but I think that there would be a lot of controversy about that.
So,
and I think that's because, and I think other people, they would say, well, I read Politico Playbook and I read Axios AM, and I would say, like, are you kidding me? Those things are not straight news.
So there is. This is one of the reasons I'm always picking on the Associated Press here. When the Associated Press does goofy kind of trend reporting and stuff instead of just doing the commodity news that we want the Associated Press to do. So that's part of it. But I would say, so let's take the two best newspapers in the United States, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Does the New York Times have a point of view? Obviously, it has a point of view. Do I generally trust the facts that are reported in the New York Times? Yeah. If the New York Times has reported it, I feel a pretty high degree of confidence that the number is accurate, the names are spelled right, that the accounting of the things is correct. I feel the same way about the Wall Street Journal. Now, if you're a left person, you don't like the way the Wall Street Journal covers things a lot of the times. If you're a right person, you don't like the way the New York Times covers the things, the stories they choose and all of that stuff. But the payload, the facts that are available are mostly reliable. And that brand of just being right at a core level is worth something, even if it's tinted in the reason Christine is so right to point out Dan Rather What did Dan Rather do? He wanted that story to be true. And he allowed, the New York Times famously referred to the memo gate as the fake but accurate.
Right.
the fake but accurate reporting of CBS News. They knew it was true. They felt like it was true. And so they experienced a confirmation bias. And they lost confidence because they got the facts wrong. Opinion is fine, but you got to stick to the facts.
Okay.
All right?
I think there's a lot more to it that goes into story selection.
Totally.
That means that even so, you're not getting a complete picture. Sure, the facts can be accurate, but the shading that you put around them and the stories that you choose to cover means there's enormous bias that can go into it, even around that.
The first bias in journalism is the stories you don't cover, right? Story selection is the first and most essential bias. For example, let's say Casey DeSantis.
Oh my gosh. And so the Washington Post did the umpteenth profile of this woman.
They have been
umpteenth in-depth profile.
Obsessed.
And I would say this was the least bad one that has been published, but it was still bad.
I didn't read it, I confess.
I read the whole thing, and the headline is Tracing the Power of Casey DeSantis. The subheadline, as Ron DeSantis pursues the presidency, his wife's role is limitless. Casey, 42, isn't a typical political spouse, which I kind of know what she means, but aren't we sort of past that?
Right.
Why does that inspire so much fear?
Oh.
And yet, the whole profile plays into the same old tropes. It does not push back against them. The next sentence in the subheadline is, her rise in TV, an insular marriage. Tell the story. I don't understand the obsession with their marriage, which just seems to be that they are very close, both personally and professionally.
In Republican circles, people say very mean things about Casey DeSantis. I've heard them say it. I've heard them say it off the record. I've heard people really be catty about her. So I assume that I thought the line in this piece about comparing her to Barbara Bush and Nancy Reagan was very interesting, because those were certainly people who had lots before Barbara Bush had fully cultivated the sweet grandmother and pearls image. She had a different kind of reputation, and people hated Nancy Reagan and wrote a bajillion profiles trashing her. So
they're serious people with serious power.
Good for the Washington Post for doing that.
It is not that good of a piece.
It's only the least bad.
But it plays into the same old tropes that, like, there's something weird about these two people, as opposed to, like, they're a couple who are very close politically, professionally, and personally, who have a shared ambition to achieve political power. And that's not even unique. A lot of people have that, but it's rare. Like, I certainly don't have that with my husband. He'd be like playing video games if I was, he wouldn't be like out on the campaign trail, but I don't want to be doing that either. It's rare, but it's not. They act like they're a museum specimen.
People are obsessed, and
we don't see any profiles of anybody else's wife. All Jill Biden gets are, like, praising BS. It's unbelievable to me.
Hear, hear. The Washington Post has other feelings about Ron DeSantis too.
Oh, well, the one we should have put in here. This one I'm like less interested in. We'll get to it. Then the article yesterday that had 6 bylines about how a donor lent him a golf simulator to, like, hit balls in the governor's mansion. And it was like 6 bylines on this story, like, guys, I think he's finished now. The donor lent it, and then they say, it was lent, not given, and they're like, but it was installed. Anyhow, talk about this one.
I did see that piece, and it Now, he did take some plane trips. I don't know. It seemed
Oh my God.
thin.
Guys, all politicians are close to donors because all they do is fundraise. It takes a lot of money to get to high office in this country.
Governor Ron DeSantis used secretive panel to flip state Supreme Court. This must have been a real scandal. Something serious must have been. It's a secret. The panel is secretive, and he used this to flip the Supreme Court. What happened? Well, for decades, the ambitions of Florida's Republican governors were stymied by the liberal-leaning state Supreme Court. That is, until Ron DeSantis was elected. The court let him erase a congressional district with a large black population. It opened the door to making it easier to impose the death penalty. Now it's poised to rule on the governor's plan to outlaw most abortions in the third most populous state. The hard right turn was by design. What? It was by design? They wanted it to happen?
Also, hard right. Like, they never say hard left.
Well, they might. I don't know. But
They don't.
the by design component, do you think that it was by design that the conservative Republican governor of Florida, what did he do? Did he murder the existing Supreme Court justices? Did he blackmail and extort them? Did they wake up with a meatball in their bed, which they knew was a sign that they would soon be killed?
With a thing of pudding.
Yeah, with a thing of
pudding container
a
and, like,
meatball and a pudding.
fingerprints in
That's
it.
right. You're next. No. He appointed justices to the court. DeSantis seized on it. Other governors would have just let the Supreme Court vacancies go unfilled. DeSantis seized on the unusual. Why was it unusual? Retirement of 3 liberal justices at once to quickly remake the court. Well, obviously, this is the dark and sinister. He's out there seizing on all of these things. And he did so with the help of a secretive panel led by Leonard Leo, the key architect of the U.S. Supreme Court's conservative majority, that quietly vetted. They quietly did it. I didn't see him take out one ad. They didn't take out one ad to vet the judicial nominees in an Orlando conference room. In a conference room.
This is a great example
Oh
of
my
how,
gosh.
like, the wording around this stuff injects bias.
Well, of course.
To create an impression.
Yeah, you could write this story 5 different ways. You could write, I'm sure the Federalist version or whatever is like heroic Leonard Leo uses once in a lifetime opportunity to save the unborn. Yeah, you could write it any number of different ways. This is a particularly foolish way to write it. Secretive panel. He seized on the retirement, the unusual retirement. Jeez Louise.
It sounds like it came from an auto-generated
AI.
it's
AI.
ridiculous.
Bard, show me a Washington Post story about Ron DeSantis in the Supreme Court.
All right. Joe Rogan.
Ready?
Yep. Offering vaccine expert $100,000 to debate Robert F. Kennedy.
Yes, and then one of his minions, one of his fry guys, went out.
I haven't followed this, so I need to know what happened.
he had RFK Jr. on his show for a long time. I listened to a lot of it, and it was, shall I say, an uncritical airing of Mr. Kennedy's theories on vaccines, on how Wi-Fi is destroying your brain cells, on a whole list of things, which found Rogan a remarkably credulous audience. My favorite was when Rogan would say, "Look that up," to his producer, and then the producer would look up Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s webpage, read Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s webpage back into, be like, "Oh my gosh, we got to get rid of Wi-Fi. We got to get rid of Wi-Fi." So this happens, and a vaccine scientist posted a long tweet thread that said, here's why these claims about vaccines are wrong specifically. So Joe Rogan said, I'll give you $100,000. I'll give $100,000 to a charity of your choice if you come on my show and debate RFK Jr. And his refusal to do so, Rogan came after him. And then eventually one of his fry guys showed up at this guy's house and confronted him in a polite way, but a creepy way, about why he wouldn't accept the $100,000 to go on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Whose house did he show up at?
The scientist's house.
Rogan showed up?
No, one of his stands.
Okay.
And the guy called him, says, because I'm a journalist. Journalists do this all the time. This is what journalists do. It is certainly true that in my life I've had to go to people's homes and knock on the door. I don't think it's appropriate to go with the camera rolling. I think you can knock on a public figure's door and ask them for a comment under certain circumstances. For example, if a person has been charged with a crime, if a person is part of an investigation, if a person has been the victim of a crime. There are circumstances in which I can see a reporter going to someone's home and knocking on the door is fine, but you certainly wouldn't do it with the camera rolling, and you certainly wouldn't do it over the fact that Joe Rogan says you should debate, that a celebrity says you should come on his show, so I have chased you down and asked you why you won't come on his show. That is not a journalistic undertaking.
Wanted to your part 2 of this.
Oh, the right wing and RFK Jr., the right wing press and RFK Jr. Any pollsters who are out there, please poll how RFK Jr. would do if he switched and was running in the Republican primary, because I think he'd do pretty good. His numbers are flat or falling in Democratic polls I see. I think he used to be at about 20, and I see him at 15 now. But it's stable to, Nate Moore, what do you say? He has higher favorable ratings among Republicans. He has higher favorable ratings among Republicans. Not only has he shifted into summer tweeds with aplomb, he is keeping the data fresh. So here's the National Review piece by Matthew Scully. Tough and talented, the long shot candidate has earned respect. And this is, we talked about it here before. At first there's a mischief-making thing that the right-wing press was doing, which is like, how come you won't debate RFK Jr.? Look at RFK Jr. How come you're not talking to RFK Jr.? Hey, Joe Biden. And then it eventually gave way to, I kind of like him. He's got a real twinkle in his eye, and I'm interested in what this guy has to say.
Well, I think that the right is happy to see somebody challenging Biden and happy to give that person airtime. I'm not sure.
I think the affection is growing. But
I think it's for that reason. I'm not sure he would do great in a Republican primary.
I think he would do as well.
He would do as well as some of the other
bet.
contenders
Here's
are
my
doing.
bet.
He'd do as well as Doug Burgum.
He'd be doing better than Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
I think that a lot of older people who have a strong, and he's very charming in his way. If you listen to him on Joe Rogan,
I agree.
He's very charming in his way. And I think that there are a lot. I think what Republicans ought to be cognizant of is if RFK Jr. ends up running as an independent, which I certainly think he might, he or switches to the Republican side. If RFK Jr. ends up on a Republican debate stage, good luck. Good luck out there, folks. Good luck.
I'm bearish on RFK Jr. on being a Republican.
We'll see what happens.
I'm taking the under on that.
But certainly I would say if he runs as an independent, he would do more harm to the Republican side than he would to the Democratic.
Okay.
Okay, speaking of rich people.
The Titanic sub.
Titanic, it's a submersible. You can't say it's a submarine. I've been corrected already as the American news media learns to become submersible experts.
We don't even have the most amazing part of this, which is the part that Cookie was telling me about before the show, which is the rich guy who's on there, his son's tweets.
Oh.
His stepson's tweets.
Oh, no. What is it? Now, as we record this, we should just say as we record this, the vessel has not been found and the clock has not run out on their air supply.
So, Cookie,
he said,
can you get a mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get on mic. We need Cookie on mic. You got us the Grimace meal. Well, you didn't get the Grimace meal. Intern Jay got it for us. So.
Thank you.
It was a big team effort. So the stepson said, please think of my family right now during this hard time. And then the next tweet was him at Blink-182 saying, they helped me get through stressful times, like rock on.
Oh.
And then he continued to tweet like, ladies, I'm single.
Oh, no.
And it went on from there. And I think he has a history of doing these sort of things on Twitter.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sad. A troubled youth.
He's the Hunter Biden of.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this Daily Beast story so much. The lost Titanic sub didn't even have a basic safety beacon. Subhead, untethered by regulations. The vehicle wasn't even equipped with some of the most essential tools. Its inexplicable design may end in tragedy. Hey, did you hear, Eliana? The government barely regulates steel tubes being dropped to the bottom of international waters by lunatic billionaires. Did you know that what agencies are even involved? Who's the oversight? We need to get a hearing to figure out when we're going to start regulating this better.
The other amazing part of this I saw
Wow.
was that there was a CBS News reporter, and I forget who it was now, but who went on this thing.
Yes, I saw that guy.
Yes.
We had him on News Nation. He was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when he did his report on CBS, he did not say, I was actually on this thing, and it was harrowing.
He didn't say?
No, he didn't say.
He talked about it
on
in his...
CBS. Oh, my gosh. Well, it sounded totally crazy what he reported. So that was amusing, too. I forget who the guy was.
Okay, Ocean Gate. So here's the New Republic. Ocean Gate CEO missing in Titanic sub had history of donating to GOP candidates.
Yeah,
so that explains why
the most 2023 story.
That's right. That's why the steel tube dropping industry is so wildly unregulated, untethered by regulations. Ocean Gate CEO Stockton Rush, here's a list of who he's donated to. Okay, it must be pretty big. Now, here's graph 2. Now, a point of a caveat here. According to these public finance records, Rush was not a Republican mega donor, but his donations over the years leaned heavily toward Republican candidates. What a trash thing to write. Here's a guy who obviously is a weird person because he likes to be dropped in a steel tube to the bottom of the North Atlantic at a very risky thing to do. Interesting and all that stuff.
Everyone knows Dino J. Rossi. A Washington State, Washington State.
I know who that is.
Republican. I've never heard of him.
Yeah, Dino Rossi got close.
Senator.
Dino Rossi got close on governor. It went to a recount. He lost by 400 votes and then ran again. And Dino Rossi was a great hope back in the post-Slade Gordon era, where Republicans still looked at Washington and Oregon as potential statewide office. So that's a long way of saying
the guy is
it was a long time ago.
hardly flying Supreme Court justices around on his private jet.
That's right, exactly. He has never taken a Supreme Court justice to the bottom of the North Atlantic in a tube. Woof. So when you say what's wrong with the media today, the answer is making a goofy story, and this is a perfect summer story for the news biz. This is a shark attack kind of story, which is it's riveting and it's interesting. But I know the stakes aren't low for the people involved, and I feel terrible for the families of these individuals. I really do. I sincerely do. But obviously they undertook a insanely reckless thing to do, and what they paid $250,000 or whatever for the privilege to do it. So the stakes are high in a narrative story, and it's interesting, but it's also a summertime kind. It's a beach read of a news story.
What do we have next here?
Oh, your boy, Fred Ryan.
Oh,
it's
Fred
over.
Ryan, publisher, out at the Washington Post. Finally.
Yes.
Finally. So the Post reported last week that Ryan, 68, will lead the newly formed Nonpartisan Center on Public Civility.
Quite so.
At the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation.
I'm for more civility.
Okay.
So this...
I mean, this is a case of staying too long in a job, and...
He was there a lot longer than I thought he would be.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, he was there a lot longer than I thought he would be.
The best part is, Ryan said his departure is unrelated to the swirl in the industry. This is the guy who failed to execute a proper pivot for the newspaper, revenue-wise, from the Trump era, out of the Trump era, and subscriptions plummeted. So he said, I firmly believe there is a sound model for successful journalism, and the Washington Post is well-positioned to do that. Yeah, he just didn't find it. I have no doubt that the high-quality journalism of the standard of the Washington Post will always be successful. Okay.
Patty Stonesifer? Cipher, the founding chief executive of the Gates Foundation, and a former. She was actually the one who put the microchips in the vaccine. And a former high-ranking Microsoft executive was named the interim CEO of the Post, starting immediately, and is leading the search for Ryan's replacement. Okay, Eliana Johnson, who should Fred Ryan's replacement be?
I don't know the people who do the business side of news well. Do you?
Well, but I think you need part of the problem for the Post was that. So Fred Ryan had been at Politico, right? He had worked for the Albritons for quite some time, right?
Yes, since their Politico days.
So the way to think about Politico is that it was a spinoff of the Washington Post, that Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei and whomever that left the Post started Politico. It was a different way of being and doing at the beginning of this century, and they were going to do this different thing. And then they brought Fred Ryan in, the august Republican Fred Ryan, a graybeard, to come in and mature up Politico into the big media property that it was becoming, which eventually led to its sale for a stunning amount of money to Axel Springer. And then once he had achieved that level, then he comes over to a real legacy organization at the Washington Post and can't get his arms around it, apparently. So what does the Washington Post? Does the Washington Post need a disruptor? Does the Washington Post need steady hands? What does the Washington Post need?
My understanding, and I'm the last person you should listen to on how to monetize journalism, but is that what the Post failed to do is to establish a stream of revenue, like steady streams of revenue outside news, because news does not make money, really. And which means what the New York Times has done is people pay for games, and people pay for cooking, and people pay for Wordle, and they have The Athletic, and these other sorts of properties where you go to the New York Times and it's not just to read the news.
Did you know
all this other stuff?
My son, who I got playing Wordle because I'm a huge nerd, my eldest man-child, I've never gotten, and it's luck, obviously, but I've never gotten it right on the first try. He's already gotten it right on the first try.
Well, he's smarter than you are.
I know. I'm devastated. I'm devastated because he's already they have these math games, and when I try to play the math games,
no question
I look
about
like
that.
I look like an audio animatronic Baeir. I'm like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I can't do it, but and so I thought at least I've got Wordle on him, and then he sent me his score with some sort of an anime GIF of somebody slicing open a cantaloupe with a laser sword or whatever. And I am defeated.
Yes.
Oh, if we're bagging on the Washington Post, can I bag just one more bag further? 17 fatalities, 736 crashes. The shocking toll of Tesla's autopilot. Get it? It's shocking because it's an electric car. It's an electric car, so it's shocking that they're killing all of these people. Hilarious. This is... I don't care whether you drive a Tesla or don't drive a Tesla. I don't care. The unfairness of this story, the rank unfairness of this story is wild to me, because what it's saying is this car is the allegation that this car is so unsafe is based on a comparison to what? How many crashes and fatalities are of typical cars that would be doing this, right? So they're holding the Tesla that it has how many people? 17 fatalities. Do you know that 40,000 people a year die in car crashes? And I'm sure that you can measure out the number of hours driven equal to the number of fatalities. This was a sensationalized, and I'll just to be particularly sour about it. If your company, if your news organization is owned by a tech billionaire, you cannot attack the business of another tech billionaire unless you're really, really good and careful about it. So if Jeff Bezos' newspaper is attacking Elon Musk's car company, you better do a really good job. And this was, this felt gratuitous, and I'm not saying that there wasn't secrecy. I'm not saying it shouldn't be paid attention to, but this was done in such a way to suggest that it would be possible to have no fatalities in driving cars, and that's not what we got here. You know, Eliana, I feel like I've been doing better lately with my dumping on the Washington Post, but this episode very clearly has turned into a long vituperation of the Washington Post. So we're already this deep in. Why stop now?
I actually liked this piece.
You liked this piece?
I thought it was okay. Okay, you go
Woof.
first.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, you go first.
Writer Kara Vaught says, inside a conservative confab for young women where feminism is a lie. For the modern MAGA woman, happiness might mean being a, quote, trad wife, fearing trans women, and buying anti-woke tampons. So I think the framing of the piece maybe that she isn't responsible for. But the point is that this Washington Post reporter went to the Young Women's Leadership Summit, an annual event thrown by Turning Point USA, a sort of MAGA youth group. This is Charlie Kirk's. I mean, it's a dubious organization. It is CPAC for people who say that CPAC is too establishment. And they bring together these constellations of right-wing media figures, often of the Michael Flynn wing of the Republican Party. And the way that this piece was, I did not like this piece because I found it sneering.
I was going to say the framing of it is snide and condescending and written like a coastal elitist who has never met, conservative woman from the Midwest.
It's very. It had a snide and sneering tone to it.
But what I liked about it was it did talk about the emergence of like this conservative counterculture to the Eastern professional class, and so I'm just going to read a little bit from it. In the 70s, women were given all sorts of lies. One of these women said, "They just told us, well, you can be a man, and I guess we've kind of accomplished that, but are we happier?" The attendees couldn't speak from experience, having been born in the 90s and 2000s, but Clark, who just turned 30, was very sure the answer was no. What I'm here to tell you is if you were to just go back to biblical roots and what God had designed women to do, we will be happier, she told them. The young women absorbing this wisdom were not necessarily zealots. Some women are saying it's a sin for me to go out, this woman said, but that wasn't her. She connected more to the remarks from Allie Beth Stuckey, a conservative Christian influencer and podcast host who told attendees that being neither a trad wife and mom nor a successful business owner would nurture their self-worth. And it did get to, I liked that it touched on some issues that I am.
I'm sorry, Colin.
Chris is showing me the picture.
Well, I'm sorry, Colin's doing a 2-finger sneak on the last McNugget in his box, and it's great.
Okay, I am interested in all of this proselytizing that is aimed at women.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of it is like, lean in, be professional, reach your highest, professional aspiration. And I felt personally that there was a lack of advice aimed at women on how to achieve their personal goals because that was considered not feminist.
Right.
Now I think in conservative circles there's almost too much. This veers to the other side of stay at home, be a trad mom. And Charlie Kirk has gone there and said that. And what I don't hear enough of in this world is everyone's different.
Right.
What will make you happy might not be what will make everyone happy. That some people will want to do both at different times in their life.
Right.
Some people will want to do both at the same time, and that some men might want to do both. And that's what I don't like about all of this. There's not enough attention to the fact that everyone's different. Women and men are both capable of doing both of these things. And
as a matter of journalism, I would have found this much more interesting if the Washington Post would have not gone and punched down at this.
I totally agree with you.
Which I'm sure is goofy. I'm sure it's nothing that I would. I'm sure it's nothing. It's not made for me, but I'm sure it's nothing I would enjoy. What would be more interesting would be the Washington Post doing this
to take it seriously.
Well, so there would be that. I'd be interested in seeing what the Washington Post had to say about a left of center confab. Right. I would be interested in if this same piece had run in National Review, it would be interesting and challenging. But the Washington Post serving this up to its readers, this is what these dumb hicks think.
Right.
Is really
and like young women trying to find their place and their purpose in the world is interesting.
Okay.
And like a sense of community.
Okay, Eliana, bad news for you.
Are we getting to the style section?
Well, almost.
You know I don't like going on too long.
Tequila is about to become the U.S.'s most popular spirit. Okay. Is this good news or bad news? It's bad news. That's bad for the environment. So every time you have a high noon or every time you make yourself a tequila sunrise, you should know that you're killing the earth.
I'm not going to feel that way.
Are you prepared to? Are you prepared to accept your part? Time Magazine wants you to accept your part in this. By Mexican law, tequila must be made from blue agave plants grown in one of 5 Mexican states. Mezcal adds a few more states and agave varietals to the mix, but the succulent plant's limited growing range means that the Mexican tequila's global popularity has also led to a loss in genetic diversity. What? As manufacturers turn to high-yielding monocrops that require increasing amounts of pesticides. Vodka, on the other hand, can be made anywhere from a wide range of grains, sugar, beets, and potatoes. Not all vodkas. Emissions-wise, tequila and vodka production are on par. So don't worry about your carbon footprint in choosing tequila, but feel very bad about the monoculture of Mexican states because of the success of tequila. Another article in which a outlet says, enjoying something that you like, maybe have you thought about feeling terrible about it? Speaking of which, ace producer and Nugget, I was going to say Nugget stealer, Colin Chicola pointed us to the whiteness of green spaces, the cyclical nature of exclusion in environmental professions. I hadn't even thought about this from the Michigan Daily. Oh, do you remember the great Yale Daily News story
about daylight savings time?
About daylight savings time?
I will never. How could? Do I remember?
We need to develop a Wretch Award for collegiate journalism because Olivia Kane's piece in the Michigan Daily could certainly be in the running, talking about how – here's your lead. As we sat around the fire that night, one of the guides said he had a question for us. He stood up and standing in front of us asked, what's missing from this group gathered together right now? Here, move your cursor. I can't read. We all looked up and from avidly focusing on not getting our marshmallows on fire and pondered the question in silence. I knew there was a hidden lesson to be learned, but I didn't know what it was. The silence stretched into minutes. Oh, my gosh. And for the first time on the trip, it was a truly uncomfortable silence. It was clear that we were missing something important. Move your cursor.
I'm not even touching my computer.
One of the guides finally sighed and said, this is a group that is entirely white. That's not okay, guys. You see that, right? In recent decades, as the climate crisis facing the global population has become more and more dire, specific fields that focus on environmental sustainability, environmental science, environmental law, environmental engineering have seen an influx of professionals. But the people who dedicate their lives to reducing the impacts of climate change are, in large part, white. Wow.
You know what? It is a good piece in noting only you rich white people care about this stuff.
That's right. That's right. There you go. There you go.
Very useful.
There you go. Men's Health Magazine. I did not know this. Men's Health Magazine has become goofy and super political. I haven't looked at Men's Health Magazine for a long time, but when somebody sent me this article that I'm going to make you read the headline of, I looked at their website and they had a big profile on Jamie Raskin on the cover, and it was stem to stern with very politicized. It sort of has a Rolling Stone kind of political energy to it. But what's this article?
About gynosexuality?
Hit me.
Okay. Men's Health. The headline is, are you gynosexual? Here's what it means according to experts.
What does it mean?
If you're attracted to women or femininity, it might be the label for you. Lead. The number of terms and identities under the LGBTQ plus umbrella is ever growing, allowing more and more people to describe their sexuality with words that make sense to them. One word you may not have heard, because, we're in search of more words.
We
for
need
these
more
things,
words.
That is helping some people express who they are is gynosexual, sometimes spelled gynesexual.
Oh, that's good that there's a varietal.
Gynosexuality refers to being sexually attracted to femininity, irrespective of one's own gender identity or the gender identity of the femme-presenting person they are attracted to. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, my gosh.
Thanks, Men's Health. Again, Men's Health, a magazine about lifting weights, wants you to have that. So there you go. I'm really excited today because for the first time, we're going to have a sports section. Okay, this is your pick. The reason we have a sports section, it's your fault. So tell us.
I absolutely loved this New York Times piece about Lionel Messi, the Argentinian soccer player's deal with Saudi Arabia, where he basically serves as a public relations spokesman for Saudi Arabia's tourism authority. And he gets millions of dollars for doing photo ops in Saudi Arabia, $2 million for tweeting things with hashtag Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. And they obtained his contract with the Royal Kingdom, where he gets paid millions of dollars to go on 4 to 5 day vacations with his family, to take these five-star trips. And I thought it was just a great window into the lengths the Saudi government goes to whitewash its reputation, and using sports stars who are willing accomplices. So he gets $2 million for a minimum of one family vacation annually lasting 5 days, or alternatively 2 annual vacations of 3 days each. Another $2 million for promoting Saudi Arabia on his social media accounts 10 times a year.
He vacations in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, about $2 million
I don't
more.
think that's enough.
And then he puts it on his Instagram, about $2 million more to participate in an annual tourism campaign, another $2 million for charitable work and appearances.
Woof.
So,
would you go on vacation in Saudi Arabia for
sure,
$2 million?
Sure.
Happy
to.
Don't tell him you're Jewish.
He also can't say anything that might tarnish Saudi Arabia.
Whatever would he mention that would possibly tarnish Saudi Arabia?
All right.
Rory McIlroy, hardest hit. Okay, here is the New York Times, I would say, a foolish question. Why do team owners raise the championship trophy first? It's a decidedly American tradition, even if it can be a buzzkill. Andrew K. writes, I don't know, 2,500 words, writes a long piece asking the question, why do team owners raise the championship trophy first? Is in reaction to, I guess, was it the NBA that recently had, yes, okay. The answer, of course, Andrew K., is because they own the team. That's why they hoist the trophy first, because they own it. And they do it because they own it. So they're a much shorter version than the 2,500 words he did. Oh, from things that I scoff at to things that I love, I want you to hear Kansas City Chiefs coach Andy Reid in a press conference talking about his team's visit to the White House.
Andy, you mentioned how the food was excellent at the White House. Can you give specifics as to what was all involved in the spread?
Yeah, so they did have some good stuff. They had a grill. I've never had this before. So a French toast, grilled cheese, and ham sandwich that they sprinkled a little bit of powdered sugar on. I mean, it was phenomenal. The guys were, and there was abundance of this, and then they had chicken fingers, exotic chicken fingers to boot, and then maybe the best part was they had, which I hadn't seen before, but little bite-sized squares of the heart of the watermelon. So whoever, my hat went off to the chef. I went back and talked to him. I mean, I just go, you guys are unbelievable. I mean, whoever cut all of that out and had the patience to do that, that goes off to him.
So just to say, Andy Reid's got it right, talking about a French toast, grilled cheese, and ham, talking about the powdered sugar, talking about how they cut the watermelon at the White House. I will just say, Andy Reid, from one fat dude to another, much. You know what? If Andy Reid was doing this podcast with us, he would definitely have eaten. He would have eaten the bun, but definitely would have gone for the Big Mac this morning, unlike you. And lastly, in sports, to share with you the great clip from the New York Yankees announcer, Nate, what's his name? John Sterling, who got hit by a foul ball during a Red Sox game and still made the call. Here you go.
Now the 3-2 swung on, a pop foul back here. Ow! 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 It really hit me. I didn't know it was coming back that far.
Okay, so if we're done with the sports section, you know what that means.
It's time for the style section.
Time for style. Time for style.
All right, leading our style section, we have Prince Harry and Meghan, Spotify ending their podcast deal. Nobody cares.
Well, what? So they got they signed a $20 million deal with Spotify to do a podcast. And how many?
I love the Wall Street Journal saying the cancellation is a sign of the continuing correction in the podcast market. A format popular among listeners, but one that has proved hard to make profitable for Spotify and many of its rivals. I mean, the thing that's really interesting to me about podcasts is that a lot of people that you've never heard of have become enormously successful podcasters, and the people who the podcasting executives try to force on the public, like Harry and Meghan and the Obamas and other people, like, we don't want them.
Well,
we don't want them.
There's that component. And then there's also, if they would have worked hard and maybe done a good podcast, and it sounds like she did not, they did not, and it sounds like it was a indolent. The Obamas learned this lesson with Netflix. Being famous helps get your foot in the door, but you have to produce a good product, and pretty clearly they did not. And so the $20 million. So they're at. I think somebody calculated it up, and it was $400. They got paid $400,000 an episode for doing 4 episodes. And I want you to know, Spotify, we're ready to work for that same rate. We are ready to go. We will be your Harry and Meghan replacement, Spotify.
Yeah.
Big Macs, no buns, every day though. That's in the rule.
Chris, this was like right up your alley.
I know.
Right up your alley. The New York Times, a flight attendant's 12 etiquette rules, and the headline is, quote, never a reason to take off your socks.
Say it. Preach it, sister.
I gagged.
Here are the rules. Everyone has the right to recline, but there's a polite way to do it. The wrong way is slamming back the seat as hard and as fast as you can. That is broken laptops, spilled drinks. Be aware of your surroundings. I disagree with this one. Don't recline. Don't recline. If you're in first class and there's lots and lots of room, maybe recline. But even there, I don't recline. Don't recline. Everybody is miserable. Don't recline. Number 2, clean up after your kids. Cosign, 100%. Absolutely. The overhead bins aren't your personal Tetris game. Lord, yes. Lord, yes. I dealt with a guy who obviously was freaking out because he was going to miss his flight, and he was an anxious fellow, and we had a delayed connection. This guy was humping that overhead bin and trying to position his stuff in such a way, and it's like, bro, if you touch my suit bag again, I'm going to feed it to you through your left nostril.
Can I quibble with one of these rules?
What? Well, let's go through.
Okay.
No one wants to hear your FaceTime conversation. You wouldn't quibble with that.
No.
Middle seat gets both armrests. That's just right. That's just appropriate. Right, because if you're in the window seat, you get the wall. If you're in the aisle seat, you get the aisle. If you're in the middle seat, you get both armrests. Leave the armrests alone. Headphones are a perfectly acceptable conversation ender. Of course.
Oh my gosh. How is there a question about that?
You don't know. You don't. If you don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Keep your socks on. What do you say?
Oh my gosh. No discussion about that.
No bare feet. Okay. Use the call button wisely.
People, she says, I highly recommend putting your footwear back on to use the lavatory. People are going to the bathroom in their socks.
Or bare feet. How'd you like to go bare feet into that situation in there? Use the call button wisely. Sure. Don't discipline other people's kids. Deal with your seating issues before you get on the plane. Yes. You don't have to switch seats if someone asks you.
Okay, this is the one I wanted to quibble with.
Okay,
because I was on the plane with my husband and baby.
Okay.
And I was seated apart from my husband.
Right.
And we asked a guy who was alone.
What kind of seat did you have?
switch.
What kind of seat were you in?
So we were actually in first class.
Okay, but were you in a middle seat? Were you in what was? We need
There's
more
no
details.
middle seat in first class.
Okay, so was in some big planes there are. So it was a 2 and 2.
A 2 and 2. I don't even remember what the seats were.
Okay.
But we asked a guy to switch so that we could sit together as opposed to separate with our baby.
Right.
And the guy said no.
Any extenuating circumstances that you can think
He
of?
was like, well, I get up a lot and.
So he needed an aisle.
He wanted an aisle.
Why didn't your husband give up the aisle for him?
I can't remember what the
All right.
situation was.
But you feel
I
that
was
he
like,
was in the wrong.
Sir, these are people traveling with a small child. Move.
So he did not move?
He did not move. But the guy next to him was like, I'll switch with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you got the seat.
And we got the seat, but I was just like, what is wrong with you? Getting up in first class is not hard. There's plenty of space.
But, you still have to excuse yourself. You have to
Sir.
go around the person. I don't know. I don't
Sir.
know. I'm taking your side, but I don't know.
Oh my gosh. It was appalling.
And flush, please. I think that obviously speaks for itself. Sockless or no socks, please flush.
No comment.
Okay. What time is it?
It is finally time for our obsessions. I really like my obsession today.
This is excellent.
So, my obsession this week is a story from 10 days ago almost now on the Substack Public, and it's a story from Michael Schellenberger, the West Coast reporter, along with Matt Taibbi and one other reporter, Alex Gutentag, who I'd never heard of. And they reported that the first people who had COVID were 3 Chinese scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, according to U.S. government sources. And that's an important story because it, of course, strengthens the theory that COVID came from a lab. And the Wall Street Journal has now confirmed that story. And the Journal on Tuesday published a story, U.S.-funded scientist among 3 Chinese researchers who fell ill amid early COVID outbreak. And the Journal writes, Ben Hu, a scientist at the Wuhan Institute of Virology who had done extensive laboratory research on how coronaviruses infect humans, was identified in U.S. intelligence reports as one of the researchers who became ill in November 2019 with symptoms that American officials said were consistent with either COVID-19 or a seasonal illness. None of the researchers died. And I just thought it was amazing that this really big story broke on a small Substack and was subsequently confirmed by the Wall Street Journal. By the way, I have not seen it in either the New York Times or the Washington Post. So wanted to commend these guys for breaking a big story that tells us a lot more than we previously knew about COVID origins. And there's a lot that Matt Taibbi does and publishes that I don't agree with, but there is an impressive zealousness that investigative reporters have that can often lead to these sorts of big breaks. And that was related to another big profile that we saw this week in The Atlantic that we will link about Lara Logan, the former 60 Minutes correspondent, who has gone around the bend. And we've seen the same with Cheryl Atkinson as well, who was at CBS News, where these things are related. Like,
it takes
there
a certain
is
kind of
an
person.
enormous passion and stick-to-itiveness and like belief in oneself and one's ideas to do these things. So anyhow, I just thought it was so cool that this story was broken on the Substack. Good for them. They have like pushed it into the American public. That was great, and we'll link both the Wall Street Journal and the Substack link.
You made a very lovely bouquet of an obsession, a well-ordered obsession. Mine is blunter. Kevin Williamson wrote, my colleague at the Dispatch wrote, when public opinion is irrelevant, The law says what the law says. The job of the Supreme Court is to apply the law, not make up the law, not to reform the law, not to ensure that the law accords with public opinion. If public opinion is opposed to the law, then the public can elect new lawmakers and write new laws. It is not up to the Supreme Court to do that for them. If representative democracy means anything, it is that the law is made by lawmakers who are elected by the people and democratically accountable to them. Not that the New York Times reading progressive public actually cares what public opinion says. Our progressive friends have been perfectly happy to use the Supreme Court to overrule national public opinion and the law for years, as long as doing so meant they got their way without having to win legislative elections and pass new laws. Public opinion was not in favor of the abortion regime that Roe began to impose in 1973, nor did public opinion favor the regime thereafter. But nobody worried very much about that. The same with same-sex marriage and Obergefell and many other social issue decisions. Most Americans believe that athletes should be required to compete on the basis of biological sex rather than gender self-identification, but don't expect to see any demands that we defer to public opinion when that comes in front of the court. He wrote this in response to a big deal that the New York Times did about the major Supreme Court decisions and comparing them to public opinion polling, and to suggest that the Supreme Court is illegitimate or is not legitimate because it doesn't accord with public opinion. And I just want to commend this work to all of you, and to say that the necessity of Kevin Williamson, there are many ways in which he is necessary, but one of the great necessities of Kevin Williamson is that first paragraph I read you, and the willingness to say hard, plain things in plain ways that can be understood, and he doesn't mince words. And as a person who has spent a lot of time in his career talking about public opinion, it is good to remind ourselves when public opinion matters and when it doesn't. Harumph.
Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail.
Hit me.
We have a note from Dave Keppel in Ohio, who writes, spotted this on Axios PM report for Monday, June 19th. A submarine exploring the Titanic wreck is missing. Go deeper.
No.
And he writes, really? Go deeper?
Is that real?
Yes.
Is that real?
So that was great.
That actually did. They actually did that. Oh, I feel much better about the things that I said earlier in the podcast. Thanks, Dave Keppel. You made me feel better.
And we have another note from Alec McGoslin in Paradise Valley, Arizona, who writes, oh, wretches, you two are at your peak when you do dramatic readings from various sources. And the Trump indictment offers a golden opportunity. It's rich in detail that aches for your thespian cunning. Will you do it, please, will ya?
Will we?
I don't think so.
We'll do one soon. I promise. We'll come up with a good. We had a couple of good. We could have done that campfire scene from The Unbearable Whiteness of.
Oh yes, that would have been really good.
That was a missed opportunity.
That would have been really good.
Mr. McCausland, I promise you that we will find a dramatic reading.
That would have been great.
Soon. And here's one that is a pretty dramatic as we come to our favorite items of the week.
That brings us to our favorite items of the week. That is Chris's favorite time, where I am forced to say something nice. But as always, Chris is going to lead by example.
Philadelphia Inquirer, 2 Rhode Island officials visited Philly. They were so rude that the state launched 2 separate investigations. Now, I don't know what's going on in Rhode Island, but here it is. At midnight before the tour, Patton, this is one of the Rhode Island guys, texted Scanapeco, whatever, my apologies, who is overseeing the redevelopment of the Providence building. Please have fresh coffee, parentheses, with milk and sugar, and the best croissant in Philadelphia ready for me upon arrival. He wrote, Director Thorson likes Diet Coke. Have a cold 6-pack waiting on the table in the conference room. You have 3 hours to convince us to give you $55 million. In the morning, as the tour began, Patton commented on Scanapeco's appearance, asking her, Lindsay, where's your husband? Why is he in Australia? Good thing you're married or I would move to Philadelphia. He also said, if I knew your husband wasn't going to be here, I would have come last night. The group visited the headquarters for Diadora, the Italian sportswear and sneaker company, where an employee offered Patton a pair of sneakers. Are these made in China, Patton asked? I hope not, because I really hate China. Then he turned to an Asian-American female staffer in the room and said, no offense, hun. Kudos to you, Philadelphia Inquirer. this is the content, the anti-Providence Rhode Island content that will satisfy many in New England.
Mine, and this could have gone in the sports section, was a Sports Illustrated piece about a college bowling coach who quit after he had his affair with a player was revealed. And his response to Sports Illustrated was, I knew it was kind of a no-no, but there's not a rule saying it can't happen.
Wow.
There's not a law saying I'm going to go to jail for doing something like this.
Wow.
There's nothing in stone. I guess it's just an ethics code, like we frown upon it, but there's no rule. There's no law broken. And then he goes on to say, so his co-head coach of the bowling team is his wife.
Wow.
And he says, I was a stay-at-home dad for 5 years with the kids. Well, Amber got to go off and coach the team. And when she'd get back, I'd run practices on top of taking care of the kids while she was back. Steve said, when they'd travel again, I would sit back and take care of the kids. That's when I got hired on. She almost forced me to run practices. I was a volunteer the entire time before that, trying to help out Amber. Once I got hired on, one thing stemmed from another. I felt like I was doing too much for what I was being valued at.
Wow. This gentleman is up for the Rick Pitino Coaching Award. He is on his way. I assume he will be joining Pitino's staff at any time. Wow. I knew it was kind of a no-no, but there's no... And also, Stephen F. Austin, having a ladies bowling team, very progressive for you. I think this is kudos to you for... You know what? Maybe this is the answer to the Washington Post story on the conservative confab. The answer is the Stephen F. Austin women's bowling team has a different viewpoint for what feminism looks like.
Unbelievable.
There you go.
That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcast.com. This has been Ink Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Just search for Wretches.